Hey friend, welcome back to the Created Worthy podcast. I am your host and fellow worthy warrior, Danielle Damrell. On this show, we are creating space for genuine connection by unifying women of all ages, backgrounds, and experiences. So grab your favorite drink and get ready to listen as we take a deep dive into our stories, making sure to honor and protect them in the process. We will also uncover the threads of creative processing that have already played a part in each of our lives. When we know how to utilize this as a skill, we can continue growing into the joy-filled, triumphant women we are created to be. You are created worthy. Hello! Welcome back to the Created Worthy podcast. Today, I am joined by Savannah Higgins, who has been a guest on here at least once before. I think we processed conviction and resistance before last season. Yes. And today, we are actually going to process, we're going to have a two-part episode where we're going to start with processing change, and then we're going to go into processing grief, because there's been some grief in Savannah's life recently, and I have been learning a lot about grief. So we're going to talk about some ways that we can process through both of those things. But we're going to start with change, but make sure to tune into next week's episode to come back and hear more of Savannah's story when we process grief. So, Savannah, thank you for being here today.
No problem, friend.
We are here on a Saturday afternoon. I am perfectly polished, makeup on, hair done. Yeah, fully ready to go.
And if that wasn't a subtle cue for the fact that you should probably be watching these videos on YouTube, because even if you are listening to her on your podcast, and as great as it is to have that outlet when you're on the go or in the gym or in the car, you do miss some of the fun interactions that get posted on her YouTube channel. So,
settle plug there, right? Thanks, Savannah. You always got my back there. I'm like, we'll just let them not know. I'm painting the picture for them, okay?
Yeah.
Well, yeah. So the reality is,
now they really do have to watch, though. Sorry, yeah. They have to, because now they're like, well, what does she really look like, and how down to earth and real and awesome is she?
And what is up with her incredible facial expressions? Like, I'm a gymnast of the face, no doubt.
I'm pretty good with my eyebrows too.
You do have some mobile eyebrows. Mobile? I've never said it like that. Okay, here's the thing. We are going to keep these episodes short. So we're going to have as close to 15 minutes as we can. And so, yeah, we want to honor your time. And we also really want to be intentional with this time. So, Savannah, let's start with talking about processing change. What change is going on in your life recently? I think this is a good time to give a little bit of an update. And then, yeah, let's talk about how we keep moving forward through transition periods in our life.
Sure. I mean, honestly, like, change should be happening to everyone. And like, it just depends on how you are accepting that change. I mean, we are changing every day. We're aging every day. That's change. So as we change, our bodies change, our minds change, our hopes change, our goals change. Like, oh my gosh, the change is infinite, right?
It never stops.
It never stops. And I think for you and I, like, we both relate on that aspect of change. Is just like, man, I feel like my life, and I always reflect back to a high school teacher that referred to me and my emotions as a roller coaster. And I was like, yeah, basically. And so like, since that time, you know, it's just one of those things where you're like, you're right, it is a roller coaster, but like, do I submit to the roller coaster and just ride and enjoy it, or like, or pick out the things to enjoy it. Cause like honestly, and if we are comparing it to a roller coaster here,
Yeah, let's go.
I'm in my 30s and yeah, roller coasters aren't my favorite thing anymore, honestly. And I actually did not ride my first roller coaster until I was 15 years old. And I was clutching the arm of my youth pastor on one side, and I had one of my best friend's older brothers on the other side.
It was scary
And
for you.
oh my gosh. And
Yeah.
so if anybody who has ever been to Universal Studios, it was actually Islands of Adventure. Anybody who's been to Islands of Adventure in Orlando would know that back in the day, there was one roller coaster and it's still there. It's just, I think, called something different, but it was the Dueling Dragons. I don't even know. I don't think they even run them at the same time anymore any longer, but they could. I don't know. And you, at one point, you go, both roller coasters are going up the hill at the same time, and then they release and they go their separate ways. And then at some point, you are coming back and your feet are coming together like this.
That would freak me out.
Right. And so, like, you pull your feet back because you're like, because you think you're going to kick the people on the other side.
Yeah.
Needless to say, we got off that ride, and my friend was like, I heard a girl screaming the entire time. Was that you? And I was like, you bet your butt it was. Like, I was terrified. But I rode all the roller coasters at that point because even in the discomfort, I still found joy in just the people that I surrounded myself with,
Right.
and the joy that
There
it
was
came from.
joy in the process still.
Yeah, yeah. And so like roller coasters have never really been my favorite thing, but it's just how you submit to the ride is, what's going to help you determine the outcome of those decisions and
Right.
the
Are you going to
experience.
enjoy it, or are you going to live in fear
Yeah, the
constantly?
experience that you're going to have and come from it. So
Right.
back to change, that does kind of just really help you with a perspective on how are you looking at change, how are you accepting change, and are you submitting, to the change and like helping the process along? Like, are you being a productive player in your own life, or are you living in fear and holding, yourself back or putting your life on pause? And, everybody has a different season. So I don't want, to discredit that, like, when you have to put your life on pause, those times do happen. I feel like I put my life on pause
Sometimes
for,
you have to reset.
yeah. And like, sometimes for some people, those periods of time are going to be longer. I feel like I put my life on pause for 10 years almost. And during that 10 years, though, I still went to college. I was still a night student while I was a full-time mom. So I stayed at home. But like during that time, I was still going to school. I was going to classes in the evenings. I was
You were
taking
doing
online.
something to make a change. Like you knew that you
Yeah,
didn't
yeah.
want to be
Like
there
I still
forever.
had sorry, I have to clear my throat and take a sip of my delicious hot tea right here. Yeah, like I knew that that period of time I was called to be the mother that I was, and just called to stay home. And I wasn't actually just staying home. I not only took online classes and took evening classes, but I was also working nights and weekends as a waitress. So like as long as my schedule worked around everyone else's, like I was doing everything I could to make ends meet and figure things out and know that it was just a season of time, and that I was continuing to support the change by getting an education and
Right.
just parenting the way that I had hoped I could in the best ways that I knew how.
Right. Yes. No, for sure. And that's a really good point, I think, to bring it back to change, in that sometimes change, like real transformational change, not even sometimes, all the time, takes time. It takes like intentional small decisions, one step at a time. And so in that season for you, you were still going to school. There were other personal development things that I know that you just do in your own spare time. You're reading books, like just even those small steps that at the time sometimes feel insignificant, but really in the long run, they're what carry you forward into getting that one big step forward closer to what you feel called into, or, the life that you feel called to live. Like it's not always about processing like these huge changes that just happen overnight. And sometimes we have to, right? Like there are seasons in our lives where unexpected things come and our entire life has to pivot. Like our entire life changes. Somebody passes away, or you lose a job, or you get a new job, or whatever the case is. There are all kinds of examples of how we have to completely turn at times. And in those times, it can feel like the change is overwhelming because it feels like it's a lot all at once. But I think it's really important to process and remember that it was all those small things that equipped you to handle the big things that you're facing right now, you know?
Yeah.
And that carries us into like what is going on in our lives right now. Like there's been all kinds of big changes in the last few years, right? And unexpected huge things have happened that have been like, okay, I thought I was going this way, but really now I'm going this way, and now I'm going this way. What are the things that have helped you to navigate through, I don't know, job changes, career path differences? Like those are just a couple of the things that we have gone through both over just the last year, but also like co-parenting. There are things that come up in co-parenting that you don't expect. That's another area that Savannah and I both have in common. And there are so many just in the last year that have changed in different ways. So Savannah, tell me how you've been able to cope with change and process it so that you can still show up here and be like, I'm going to help people through my experience.
So I mean, like I was saying earlier, that while I don't have a secret ingredient for the masses, and I wish that there was the perfect formula that I could give to everyone that's going to actually help and make a difference. Like it's kind of more of just a trial and error. Like life really is just a trial and error, honestly, and you get one chance to try and see what makes you happy in life and what brings you peace. And that understanding and accepting that you can't change the things that have happened to you in your past, but that, and while they may have shaped and formed habits or things like that affect you still to this day, it doesn't make you who you are. Like you still get the choice of, okay, how am I going to look for more? Right. And sometimes more could be journaling. Like I like to journal. I'm not really consistent in it, but when I do, it's something that's like easy and like manageable, especially in those times of your life that nothing else feels like really manageable because it's so chaotic. Mm-hmm. So even just writing down what
you identify the things that you can control.
Yeah. And so for me, sometimes I'll do it in the morning, like if I have things that I need to process. And like recently, obviously, I sent you a very long form of creative processing. And that was a morning that I sent you that big long thing. And I wrote it right before I went to work that day. So like sometimes I do need space and time to process something or a thought or like a story that I'm like, that story needs to get on paper kind of thing. I will process something in the morning like that. But when I'm writing and I'm purposely saying, I need to write in my journal, and like, I'm like, I gotta find something to write about. I will at least every night try to write down 5 things that I'm grateful for that happened that day. And so it forces me to like rewire my brain into thinking positive thoughts. On that thought, I also use like positive affirmations on my mirror. I write those down. And then I've been going to Danielle's creative processing workshops, which has been amazing because the community is just such a blessing. And I don't know, everybody's just super real and we all just check in, and it's just a nice community to have where we have a safe space and we can explore different areas of how to creatively process things like change.
Exactly. I was just going to say our last workshop just last week was about uncertainty, and uncertainty and change really go hand in hand. I think that
Right.
the steps I use for processing uncertainty would probably be the exact same steps I would recommend for somebody to start processing change, which is the first step is identifying what you can control versus what you can't control. And being able to say, like, okay, some of this change I can't control, but some of this change I can. And then with the things that you can, what habits or things are you doing already that are supporting you? Like Savannah was saying, journaling, going to the creative processing workshops, just taking time to process, listening to her body. She also goes to the gym. She has all of these different ways that she supports herself so that she can continue to grow and develop new neural pathways to do things differently and to overcome the fear of uncertainty or the discomfort as you're going through change, right? So that's really what I would recommend. Identify the things that you can and you can't change. Celebrate the things that you are doing to support yourself through the change, and then figure out how you can optimize that. If you already have a morning routine, but you're still really struggling with anxiety, what things do you think you can maybe change in your morning routine to help support you in this new way as you're walking through this change? And go ahead.
You have to have a really clear idea of what you want on the other side of that, though. Like that, there's only so much preparing yourself for the change and so much that you can do to get yourself through the change. But like, you have to have a clear understanding of what you want to have on the outcome of that change.
The outcome, right?
Yeah. And if that change is inevitable, which it is, then just being prepared and understanding that like you might not know the path that you're going to get there, take to get there, but you do have to understand what you truly want in your heart.
Right. Exactly. Which I think goes back to the third thing that we talked about with uncertainty, which was like we engaged our imaginations. But another way of doing that is just creating a vision. If it's not natural for you to have dreams and visions of what you want your life to look like, then that takes a little bit more effort than for somebody who's naturally a visionary. But you have to know, like Savannah was saying, you have to know that what you're going towards exists. And that starts by thinking about it, dreaming about it, sitting down and processing what you're going through so that you can figure out what that end result really is that you're going for and you're going towards. So I think that was a really good 15-ish minute discussion about processing change. Thank you, Savannah, so much. And stay tuned for next week's episode all about processing grief. Savannah's going to share a little bit more of her story of what she's gone through recently. She had a really powerful experience actually being with somebody as they took their last breath. And she has a little bit of her own creative processing that she feels called to share. And you don't want to miss it. So thank you for listening, and we will see you next week. Bye.
Bye, guys.
Thanks for tuning in to the Created Worthy podcast. If anything in today's show resonated with you, can you do me a huge favor and go leave a 5-star review? This helps more listeners find the show, and it also expands the impact, messages, and stories that are shared here. All the links and guest information are in the show notes. If you're on social media, I want to personally invite you to continue the conversations about these important topics that we're talking about. You can find Created Worthy on both Instagram and Facebook by just typing in Created Worthy Podcast. Can't wait to talk to you soon, friend. And don't forget, you are created worthy.